matters very little. What's the thing that matters then? I asked. He seemed to search for an appropriate answer. What matters is that a warrior be impeccable, he finally said. But that's only a way of talking, a way of beating around the bush. You've already accomplished some tasks of sorcery, and I believe this is the time to mention the source of everything that matters. So I will say that what matters to a warrior is arriving at the totality of oneself. What is the totality of oneself, Don Juan? I said that I was only going to mention it. There are still a lot of loose ends in your life that you must tie together before we can talk about the totality of oneself. He ended our conversation there. He made a gesture with his hands to signal that he wanted me to stop talking. Apparently there was something or somebody nearby. He tilted his head to the left as if to listen. I could see the whites of his eyes as he focused on the bushes beyond the house to his left. He listened attentively for a few moments and then stood up, came to me and whispered in my ear that we had to leave the house and go for a walk. Is there something wrong? I asked, also in a whisper. No, nothing is wrong, he said. Everything is rather right. He led me into the desert chaparral. We walked for perhaps half an hour and then came to a small circular area free from vegetation. A spot about 12 feet in diameter where the reddish dirt was packed perfectly flat. There were no signs, however, that machinery had cleared and flattened the area. Don Juan sat down in the centre of it, facing the east, southeast. He pointed to a place about 5 feet away from him and asked me to sit there, facing him. Pause. What are we going to do here? I asked. We have an appointment here tonight, he replied. He scanned the surroundings with a quick glance, turning around on his seat until he was again facing the southeast. His movements had alarmed me. I asked him who he had the appointment with. With knowledge, he said. Let's say that knowledge is prowling around here. He did not let me hook onto that cryptic answer. He quickly changed the subject and in a jovial tone, he urged me to be natural, that is, to take notes and talk, as we would have done at his house. What was most pressing on my mind at that moment was the vivid sensation I had had 6 months before of talking to a coyote. That event meant to me that for the first time I had been capable of visualizing or apprehending, through my senses and in sober consciousness, the sorcerer's description of the world. A description in which communicating with animals through speech was a matter of course. We're not going to engage ourselves in dwelling on any experience of that nature, Don Juan said upon hearing my question. It is not advisable for you to indulge in focusing your attention on past events. We may touch on them, but only in reference. Why is that so, Don Juan? You don't have enough personal power yet to seek the sorcerer's explanation. Then there is a sorcerer's explanation. Certainly, sorcerers are men. We're creatures of thought. We seek clarifications. I was under the impression that my great flaw was to seek explanations. No, your flaw is to seek convenient explanations. Explanations that fit you and your world. What I object to is your reasonableness. A sorcerer explains things in his world too, but he's not as stiff as you. How can I arrive at the sorcerer's explanation? By accumulating personal power. Personal power will make you slide with great ease into the sorcerer's explanation. The explanation is not what you would call an explanation. Nevertheless, it makes the world and its mysteries, if not clear, at least less awesome. That should be the essence of an explanation. But that is not what you seek. You're after the reflection of your ideas. I lost my momentum to ask questions, but his smile urged me to keep on talking. Another issue of great importance to me was his friend Don Genaro and the extraordinary effect that his actions had had on me. Every time I had come into contact with him, I had experienced the most outlandish sensory distortions. Don Juan laughed when I voiced my question. Genaro is stupendous, he said, but for the time being, there is no sense in talking about him or about what he does to you. Again, you don't have enough personal power to unravel that topic. Wait until you have it and then we'll talk. What if I never have it? If you never have it, we'll never talk. At the rate I'm going, will I ever have enough of it? I asked. That's up to you, he replied. I've given you all the information necessary. Now it's your responsibility to gain enough personal power to tip the scales. You're talking metaphors, I said. Give it to me straight. Tell me exactly what I should do. If you have already told me, let's say that I've forgotten it. Don Juan chuckled and lay down, putting his arms behind his head. You know exactly what you need, he said. I told him that sometimes I thought I knew, but that most of the time I had no self-confidence. I'm afraid that you are confusing issues, he said. The self-confidence of the warrior is not the self-confidence of the average man. The average man seeks certainty in the eyes of the onlooker and calls that self-confidence. The warrior seeks impeccability in his own eyes and calls that humbleness. The average man is hooked to his fellow men, while the warrior is hooked only to himself. Perhaps you are chasing rainbows. You're after the self-confidence of the average man, when you should be after the humbleness of a warrior. The difference between the two is remarkable. Self-confidence entails knowing something for sure. Humbleness entails being impeccable in one's actions and feelings. I've been trying to live in accordance with your suggestions, I said. I may not be the best, but I'm the best of myself. Is that impeccability? No, you must do better than that. You must push yourself beyond your limits all the time. But that would be insane, Don Juan. No one can do that. There are lots of things you do now which would have seemed insane to you 10 years ago. Those things themselves did not change, but your idea of yourself changed. What was impossible before is perfectly possible now, and perhaps your total success in changing yourself is only a matter of time. In this affair, the only possible course that a warrior has is to act consistently and without reservations. You know enough of the warrior's way to act accordingly. But your old habits and routines stand in your way. I understood what he meant. Do you think that writing is one of the old habits I should change? I asked. Should I destroy my new manuscript? He did not answer. He stood up and turned to look at the edge of the chaparral. I told him that I had received letters from various people telling me that it was wrong to write about my apprenticeship. They had cited as a precedent that the masters of Eastern esoteric doctrines demanded absolute secrecy about their teachings. Perhaps those masters are just indulging in being masters, Don Juan said, without looking at me. I'm not a master. I'm only a warrior. So I really don't know what a master feels like. But maybe I'm revealing things I shouldn't, Don Juan. It doesn't matter what one reveals or what one keeps to oneself, he said. Everything we do, everything we are, rests on our personal power. If we have enough of it, one word uttered to us might be sufficient to change the course of our lives. But if we don't have enough personal power, the most magnificent piece of wisdom can be revealed to us, and that revelation won't make a damn bit of difference. He then lowered his voice, as if he were disclosing a confidential matter to me. "I'm going to utter perhaps the greatest piece of knowledge anyone can voice," he said. "Let me see what you can do with it. Do you know that at this very moment you are surrounded by eternity? And do you know that you can use that eternity if you so desire?" After a long pause, during which he urged me with a subtle movement of his eyes to make a statement, I said that I did not understand what he was talking about. "There. Eternity is there," he said, pointing to the horizon. Then he pointed to the zenith. "Or there, or perhaps we can say that eternity is like this." He extended both arms to point to the east and west. We looked at each other. His eyes held a question. "What do you say to that?" he asked, coaxing me to ponder upon his words. I didn't know what to say. "Do you know that you can extend yourself forever in any of the directions I have pointed to?" he went on. "Do you know that one moment can be eternity? This is not a riddle. It's a fact, but only if you mount that moment and use it to take the totality of yourself forever in any direction." He stared at me. "You didn't have this knowledge before," he said, smiling. "Now you do. I have revealed it to you, but it doesn't make a bit of difference because you don't have enough personal power to utilize my revelation. Yet, if you did have enough power, my words alone would serve as the means for you to round up the totality of yourself and to get the crucial part of it out of the boundaries in which it is contained."